Okay, now we're going to show you how you can administer inventory mappings after they've been changed as well. And actually, inventory mappings don't change necessarily, but new resource groups, new folders, resource pools, all these things get created at the protected site, which may or may not require you to then create inventory mappings to reflect that change. Same with the recovery site. You could have new VLANs added, old VLANs deleted, which changes the network port groups that the virtual machines are assigned to during the recovery. So what I'll show you what we've done here is going into hosts and clusters view real quick. I've gone and added a couple resource pools, SETI for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence program, so you can run your SETI servers in there. And I think game servers is also a new resource pool that I've added. Inside networking, I've also added a couple new port groups. I've added game VLAN and SETI virtual machine port group. So this could be something that could happen in any one of your sites. So what I'll need to do is then go into site recovery plugin on the protected site, and I'm going to find my inventory mapping section. So to do that, under inventory mappings, I'll click configure. Lots of yellow question marks. So it's SRM has gone out and actually discovered that there's some resources that don't seem to match up, or it doesn't know where to put them. So if we had protected virtual machines assigned to any of these resources, we would also see an issue within their configuration of their protection group. Right now you can see that they're all okay. But let's go ahead and edit one of the virtual machines. Let's do critical PC 2. And under critical PC 2, instead of it being plugged into its normal virtual machine group, I'm going to edit settings here. And under network, I'm going to actually assign it to the SETI network label, and then click OK. 100% complete. Okay, what this should have done, and we'll see in just a second, going into Site Recovery Manager, Critical PC2 is part of this protection group. Interesting. So you can see here that under Critical PC2, it thinks it's going to be going to the DR network, which is certainly the case. But if I was to remove protection for this guy, and I've quickly done that, you'll notice that I have an issue. Now I probably wouldn't have had a problem with that virtual machine. The recovery probably would have worked just fine because I would have wanted it to be restored to that DR network. However, any new virtual machines that happen to belong to those resource pools and you would like to configure protection on them, you're going to have this same issue here, which says mapping missing. So before we can correct the protection on this critical PC2 virtual machine, I'm going to have to edit those inventory mappings so that SRM knows automatically what to do when protection is configured on certain virtual machines. So to do that, go back up to the home tree here so I know where I'm going, and then I'll go to inventory mappings and configure. This is a pretty easy, straightforward thing, as you remember when we first set these up. But just click on the resources that aren't configured and then click configure. In this case, I just want to map the SETI network to the VM network and click OK. Excuse me, the game VLAN network. And we'll do SETI next. SETI, we'll map that to DR because we have to have disaster recovery for the SETI network. I'm just kidding. That's dry humor on Sean's part. Game servers, game server resource pool. We'll then configure and put that in dev test. That's not terribly important. SETI resource pool. Again, high importance DR resource pool. One last thing, we have a folder on the protected site to organize protected virtual machines. We'll configure that to the recovery site. We don't have any folders on that side yet, so we'll just use the default folder, so to speak, at the data center level and use recovery site data center object. Very good. We have now corrected the inventory mappings so that they look correct, but we still have an issue with our protection group. Now the status has changed from mapping missing to not configured. Let's configure that now. I'll click configure all, and yes. And just like that, we have now configured protection once we have corrected the inventory mappings. So that's about all you can really do with inventory mappings. It's a pretty straightforward and simple thing to configure, although it's really good to understand if they're not configured, what are some of the other effects of that. And we got a chance to see that with the critical PC to virtual machine not being configured or having the mapping missing. But again, that was only because we removed protection from it and then tried to re-add protection. Changing of the inventory mappings to any VMs that are part of an existing protection group won't necessarily affect their ability to be recovered, since the placeholder VMs have already been created, sometimes with the correct information. However, if the inventory mappings that were used to create that placeholder VM were possibly pointing to a resource that's no longer at the recovery group, then we could have a few issues. Let's explore that now and see exactly what that would look like if, for instance, one of the resource pools was missing at the recovery site. Okay, so I've gone in and made a few changes on the recovery site to mess up the resources of the virtual machines, of the placeholder virtual machines and what they're pointed to. So basically, placeholder virtual machines take their marching orders from the inventory mappings that we have established already. What you can see here is that we have networks being pointed to the VM network and the DR network over at the recovery site. And there's really no notification that these have changed. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the recovery site looks like. Over here at the recovery site, let's take a look at the recovery ESX server and the configuration of the network. Oh my, I don't see a DR network and I don't see a VM network. Someone has been over here messing things up. And there's now a recovery network and a test network. So I imagine the recovery network would map closely to the DR network, and the test network would be reserved for test VMs only. So what did that do to the placeholder virtual machines? Well, the placeholder virtual machines still are expecting VM network, and in the case of critical PC and all of these in the DR pool, they're all looking for the DR network, which no longer exists. Well, we have two options here. How can we fix this? Well, we could manually edit these placeholder virtual machines by edit settings, choosing the appropriate network. However, that would mean me touching each of the PCs, which I don't like to do. Earlier I talked about a best practice I like to observe when designing my protection groups, and that is trying to, as much as possible, keep every single virtual machine within a protection group pointed to similar recovery resources. So one thing that I have in my mind is that everything going to the DR resource pool which happened to be the first protection group we set up. I want that entire protection group going to the exact same stuff. I don't want to change that. So I think the easiest way for me to modify all these virtual machines at one shot would be to go back and remove protection and then reconfigure the protection, which should happen very simply. So let's do that. Okay, so we're back here at the protected site. And since we are bouncing around, it'd be good that I just check and do that sanity check thing. Yep, local site here says protected site. I know I'm in the right spot. So where do we go? First off, we have new resources and new mappings. I'm going to want to set up the mappings so that they're correct. So to do that, I'm going to check game VLAN and do configure. And recovery network. Kind of a little bug there. We still see the DR network, even though we just verified that it no longer exists. I'm going to check recovery network and move down. Everywhere I see DR network, I'm going to configure. Change that to recovery. Great, that's pretty easy. Now, I don't think I did not see any difference in resource pools when I was over there. And I know I didn't because I didn't reconfigure them. So what I'm going to do now, which will be the easiest way to go, is I'm going to remove protection on my virtual machines. Which shouldn't take too long. Maybe I can select more than one. Nope. By doing this, I can then do a configure all on the virtual machines. And if I have my inventory mappings correct, they should all get the correct network setting at the recovery site without any manual intervention. So I'm going to go ahead and click configure all, and yes. Successful. Good deal. Let's see what that looks like. So over in the DR pool is those virtual machines that are the placeholders. And just as we wanted, their network is all now corrected and pointed to the recovery network. We do have one that's messed up here, which is under that other protection group. We'll go ahead and change that out too. And I'll remove protection on this guy. I'm sure I want to do that. Shouldn't take too long. All that's going to do is remove the placeholder VM at the recovery site. Which, if you're not familiar, let's go ahead and take a look at just so you can see what the effect of the... Yep, here at the recovery site, there was a virtual machine here under dev test, a placeholder virtual machine. It's no longer. The effect of removing protection on a VM removes its placeholder from the SRM recovery site. So we'll go ahead and click on this guy and actually do configure all now that we know that we got the mappings configured properly. And once this guy's configured, we should be able to see that it's pointed to the DR network. And there's a placeholder VM created for him over at the recovery site. Yep, just like I said, test machine 6 is back. It's in the dev test pool, just as the inventory mappings pointed it to, and it's getting the recovery network. So all is good and well at the recovery site for the placeholders, at least once we corrected our inventory mappings. So you got to see two sides of the equation there. You got to see what happens if inventory mappings are not corrected to reflect new resources added to the protected site. And you also got to see the effect on a protection group in that case too, at least if you created a new virtual machine that used those resources. It was a matter of you configuring the inventory mappings prior to configuring protection. And just as we showed you now, you can also have inventory mappings go to resources at the recovery site that can change or get updated over time, which can possibly invalidate your recovery plans. What we were able to do was identify that and correct the inventory mappings and remap the protection groups by removing protection from them and then re-adding the protection group to, re-adding protection to the virtual machines that were part of those protected data stores. That was a lot to cover, and that about does it here though for inventory mappings. SRM alarms are a key tool in the SRM Administrator's Toolbelt. There are dozens of alarm events that you can use to better administer the SRM system and stay alerted to key events. These alarms help you maintain a good, known, tested state of your SRM configuration at all times. See, there is a large danger with SRM, and that it's a disaster recovery product. So it might not get the daily attention it needs until test time or until the actual disaster recovery itself. And at that time, it is critical that the software and your configuration are ready to work. So staying on top of any changes to the configuration is crucial to preventing any surprises when your businesses need it most. We'll cover what you need to know to leverage these alarms in your environment in the rest of this lesson. See, SRM alarms can be configured to send an email notification or trigger some other action. But none of the SRM alarms are configured by default to take any action. So if you need them to take a specific action, you'll need to configure that yourself. The options are email to be sent to specific people. Best practice, as many of you know, is to create an alias that could possibly be routed to multiple people, or in the case of someone getting hit by a bus or moving on to new employment, it's good to have that alias set up so that we don't have to change the specific system's email in to the administrators. The second is a notification trap, or an SMP trap. This can be used to notify tools like HP OpenView or other monitoring software that centralize your monitoring of your systems. And finally, a custom script can be used as well to take action when a certain event happens. This is kind of interesting in that SRM is an automation product, and we would layer automation on top of that with the scripts. Very, very unique option there in that anything you can dream up with a script could be thrown on top of VMware's SRM. So it's also good that you know if you require email notification that you'll need to make sure you have that set up within vCenter. And most of you probably have that set up anyway so that you can take advantage of vCenter's other alerts that you have. So with that, let me show you how we can use this simple but very effective tool. All right, here, let's take a look at the Site Recovery Manager Alarms feature. Right now we're logged into the the protected site, which is under the local site here. And to access alarms, we'll simply go to the Alarms tab, where we're presented with quite a few different versions of the alarms that are possible with SRM. Some of my favorites are the remote site down, because this can be used to let you know when the remote site recovery manager is down. And then consequently, you'd want to probably use the up as well, so that if you're getting notified that it's down and it goes right back up in 5 minutes, it's nice to get that notification on the BlackBerry so that you don't hop in your car to go into the office and then only to find out, hey, it was up 10 minutes ago, so you wasted a trip. Although who drives into the office anymore nowadays anyway? They'll just fire it up on their laptop as far as VPN and go in and do it. But I digress. So let's look at this actually. Let's edit the settings on this alarm, and you'll see that it's very simple options. We have the description of what it does, and the actions. Like we noticed, or like we said earlier, there is no action set up by default. You'll need to add those yourself. So to do that, we'll click on Add, and we have a drop-down box that we can choose one of the three types. Run a script, send a notification trap, send an email. I'm going to go ahead and send an email. Any email in here would work. As long as this is set up through Virtual Center, then you're good to go. See that it was saved. Item of note, if you go into the the administration settings and vCenter server settings, this is where you'll find how to set up mail for your site. I don't have it set up in my environment because I don't have a mail server, but you would simply enter in the address to your SMTP server and the account that you'd like to have notifications sent from. Usually people use something like vCenter or VMware admin, whatever. There is no allowance for mail authentication at this time, so you'll need to work with your mail server administrators to allow for email from the vCenter IP address. Another one of my favorite alarms is the VM added alarm. And that simply allows you to get notified when a VM has been added into a protection group and is ready to be configured for protection. So how does a VM get added to a protection group? If you'll remember from earlier in the lesson, we actually talked about VMs getting storage vMotion, cold migrated, or possibly deployed from template or a brand new VM created on a replicated data store that's under protection. So just by that simple fact of moving a virtual machine into the replicated volume means it's ready to be configured for protection. I like to get notified this because one, it's something I might know about, and it's just a nice reminder to say, oh yeah, I need to go on and remember to configure protection on that virtual machine. Or it's also a great cue so that we can find out that the VM deployment team or some other team that I'm not aware of has accidentally deployed a virtual machine to a replicated data store and it shouldn't be there. So if I don't know anything about this virtual machine, it's nice to get that email so I can go in and let them know, hey, wrong spot guys, you need to move it. And these are all good ways to get these notifications in advance so that you can keep your SRM configuration up to date and ready to perform when needed. Like we mentioned earlier, there's dozens of these alarms. We could go into each one in excruciating detail, but we'll leave that to you since it is very simple, and the type of alarms you're going to actually need in your environment are really going to be a function of the amount of staff you have and the complexity and really what you're trying to achieve. So with that, thanks for watching, and we'll get back to you at the next section. Okay, now it's time to discuss configuring access control for SRM. As any good administrator knows, security needs to be baked into the system from the very beginning and not added later as an afterthought. A good analogy I like to share with customers or users is that of baking chocolate chip cookies. If you can include the chocolate chips to the batter prior to baking, the cookies taste a lot better and they're a lot easier to make than if you were to try to take chocolate chips and push them into the cookies after they've baked. It's messy and it's a lot of work and doesn't turn out quite right. Anyway, but I digress. SRM offers some additional security roles and permissions to layer on top of vSphere that administrators can use to provide just enough access to the users that need access to SRM. A good thing to note here, though, is that SRM user rights are not enough. You also need at least some vCenter permissions to even log into vCenter, as well as some additional permissions to administer vSphere inventory items as part of your SRM administration duties. For example, if it's the case of changed inventory mappings at the recovery site, it may be necessary to have the privilege to edit the settings on the placeholder VMs so that the recovery VMs will come up to the appropriate network that was changed for whatever reason. How granular you need to go, however, really depends on the size and level of security within your IT organization. In general, if you have a small org, having a right-sized amount of security is the preferred way to go, and not overcomplicating security, because you usually have reduced staff, and if someone's on vacation or leaves the company or, God forbid, gets hit by a bus, if it's a simpler, more straightforward security system, there's a better chance that the remaining IT staff can provide availability in the event of a disaster. And it's easier for consultants to come in to assist your organization. But again, it all depends on the level of security that you need at your organization. Some ideas for some common sense granularity of permissions might be that of creating some specific recovery plans that map to specific IT functional groups or application groups. A good example would be that of an Exchange mail system or a database server system with many different servers and databases or file servers. Enterprise applications that are critical to your organization are a key candidate for protection with SRM, and therefore possibly encapsulating all their servers within a single recovery plan would be a wise way to go. And mapping recovery plans to functional groups like this, it's just a great way to bake security into the SRM installation during the design up front. In many cases, if you can map recovery plans to a functional group, let's say the Exchange Mail Server Administration group, probably already has their own Active Directory groups assigned to their group so that they can more easily assign the SRM roles to those existing groups already. So it's a lot easier in that regard. It also takes away the mess of having to carve up a large recovery plan that has many different functional groups and having to somehow map individual security to individual virtual machines. It's not very easy. So this is probably the route that most companies go. And speaking of security, have you talked with your security guy recently or your security team? This is a great opportunity to include them in your SRM design. Contrary to popular belief, the security team or your security guy at your company, if you're a smaller company, they really want to be a solution provider and they want to help you. And they're very thankful if you can include them up front early, because it makes their job a lot easier in trying to create good, secure solutions to work with your project of designing an SRM solution for your company. Not only that, they're not more than likely not going to be telling you no after the fact, because if they can work with you up front, it's a cheaper solution and there's less rework that has to be done. So I highly recommend you get together with your security team and talk about how you're going to bake security into this SRM solution. So all that's some good background on configuring access control for SRM, but let's see it in action. And the best way to do that is with a demo. In the following demo, we're going to show what the added roles are that SRM has made possible. We're also going to demonstrate and kind of show you around how I've configured some access for a user called SRM Joe, a standard SRM recovery administrator. And we're going to create a custom role just for the purpose of executing a recovery plan. And that would be for a user called VP of Recovery. This would be an executive user that can only initiate a failover. And finally, we'll show you how you can test some of these roles, and I highly recommend you do test any security roles that you create within SRM. Otherwise, what's the point? Okay, with that, let's dive into the demo. All right, it's time to demo SRM access control. First off, we're going to log into one of the virtual center sites that has SRM installed on it so we can demonstrate which roles have been added because of SRM. In my case now, I'm logged into the protected site. And at the home screen, what I want you to do is go into roles under Administration. This is where we'll see the custom SRM access roles created. The very top here, you'll see the default roles that come with vSphere out of the box. From anything with protection or recovery is now a new role created by SRM. And if we were to take a look at just one of them, I'll go ahead and edit protection groups. You'll see that each one has a pre-configured set of privileges that basically roughly map to what a protection group administrator might be able to need to do in most of the cases. Of course, these out-of-the-box roles aren't going to work for every single use case. You may need to copy them and edit them and tweak as you see fit. We'll go ahead and do that later in this demonstration. Anyway, as we drill down, we can see all the different options that would make up, say, a protection group administrator. We'll cancel that and contrast that with, let's say, the protection VM administrator and edit the role there. You can see quite a different set of privileges. One is only able to do things with virtual machines, and the other is able to do things at a complete protection group level or overall level. There's also recovery administration activities, so part of these roles would only apply to the protected site and part would only apply to the recovery site. In our demonstration and the typical use case that we've been demonstrating overall in this entire instructional video has been one way. We've been going from one protected site to one recovery site. So it's very easy to see where these roles would end up being assigned. In the case of a bidirectional SRM setup, we might need to have recovery roles set up on both sites because there's no longer a one-to-one mapping of recovery to protected, right? A protected site is a recovery site and a recovery site is a protected site. So it's going to be a little messy at that point. But we'll keep it very simple for the sake of this demo, and we're still going one way. We have a protected site, we have a recovery site. So that's great. That's the roles that come out of the box. But how do we use them? Well, to demonstrate that, I'm going to actually show you how I've set them up for a user called SRM Joe. All right, so let's take a look at the user account SRM Joe that we had created and map some SRM custom roles to so that we can get a better idea of how this all goes together. To do that, we'll quickly manage the box that we're on and take a look at the users and groups that we have set up. You can see that we have a user called SRM Joe, and if we take a look, SRM Joe is a member of a group. He's a member of SRM admins. Since it's a lot easier in a larger environment to assign permissions to a group and then have many different people inherit the permissions of the group, we're going to go ahead and do that for this demo as well. And all SRM roles will be assigned to this group, SRM admins. So first things first, we do know that in order to administer SRM, you need privilege to be able to log into the Virtual Center with your vSphere client. So let's start there first. To do that, we click on Hosts and Clusters and take a look at the top level, because that's what controls access to vSphere. You'll see that we've added the SRM admins user group and we've assigned it the role of read-only. This is the basic floor level permission, let's say, that you need in order to even get access to vSphere to do anything. Additional privileges would then be needed to give you just enough permission within SRM, which we'll dive in and show you that too. If we look at the data center level, we don't have nothing. We don't have anything at the cluster level either. Permissions. But what we do want to show you is at the SRM level. So we'll go into the site recovery plugin. and take a look at the root level of site recovery, and you'll see that we've added in the group SRM admins and have assigned it the role of protection SRM administrator. This is going to allow SRM Joe to do the privileges allowed for by the protection SRM administrator role. If we were to look at the properties, we could change this to other roles. However, that's not what we want to do in this demo. Instead, though, let's take a look back and see what SRM Joe actually has rights to do with that role. To do that, go to Home and Roles. And we're looking for SRM Administrator. Let's edit that and just refresh ourselves with what Joe is able to do at the protected site. His only privileges are under Site Recovery Manager, and he has the ability to set advanced settings, configure the array managers, map and remove inventory mappings, and he can create, modify, and remove the remote site. So basically, he can do everything in that setup dialog, but he can't create protection groups. He can't do recovery plans. He's basically a very high-level nuts and bolts guy that would be concerned with the infrastructure, not necessarily the recovery of virtual machines or the protection of them. So you can see how granular we can get at this level. Again, showing you again what SRM Joe probably has access to. He has the ability to connect remote sites. He has the ability to scan for array managers, and he has the ability to map inventory. That's it. Everything else is left up to another administrator. We've also set up Joe with some privileges at the recovery site. So let's take a look at those now. Here we are at the recovery site, and we can see at the recovery VC level, there is the group SRM admins, and we've given that group the recovery inventory administrator right. Let's take a look at what that is, and we can see how it's being applied within the different tree structure of vSphere. We have someone with the virtual machine administrator right at all of these levels, and it's assigned to SRM admins. Very nice graphical view of where that role is being applied. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to edit the role and show you what it is that this role can do. Under resources, we can assign virtual machines to resource pools. We can modify virtual machines. This is during the recovery. And we can do some of those individual configuration tasks to an individual virtual machine in the event that, let's say, like I described earlier, inventory mappings get changed and a network no longer exists at the recovery site. You'll have to go in and update the placeholder virtual machines manually if you want that to take place. This permission or this role would allow that. Interaction. There's plenty to go here, and we could go and look at all of these privileges, but you get the idea. So we'll cancel this. And of key importance to me is I wanted to show you what it looks like if you're the default administrator. So like right now, we're logged in as administrator, and I can do absolutely everything in SRM that we need to do. That's how we've been configuring this so far. It's easy because, well, it's for demonstration, so we don't have the security needs that you do. But I can do test, and I can run a recovery plan. But can SRM Joe test and run a recovery plan? Well, to find that out, what I'd like to do is click at the recovery level and look at the site recovery level. So this is where we can see at a top-down view what permissions have been assigned. And we have SRM admins have been assigned to recovery plans administrator. Let's make sure that Joe is a member of that group first off. We have SRM admins. And we have SRM Joe as a member. Great. So we know that SRM Joe should be covered under the Recovery Plans Administrator roles and responsibilities. And as you can see, that permission is propagated down through the tree to cover this critical server recovery plan. Right now, as a default administrator, I can run it. But under Recovery Plans Administrator role, I don't think you can. I'll show you that quick so that you can see for yourself. Recovery Plans Administrator, and I'll edit that role. And the Recovery Plan permission is actually under Site Recovery Manager, Recovery Plan, and we have these options: create, modify, remove, run, and test. As you can see, run is unchecked. So, reason would have it that SRM Joe should not be able to run a full-out recovery, although he should be able to test the recovery plan 24/7.